What's going on, everybody? It's Waiju coming at you with a brand new video, and today I am very excited to bring y'all my Goblin Biker deck profile post the release of Phantom Nightmare. This deck is so much fun. I've not been this excited for an archetype in a good while, honestly, and I'm super glad that it's actually a decent deck as opposed to an archetype that I'm excited for that ends up not being amazing. I unfortunately did not get the chance at the time to cover these cards when they were revealed. I believe I was in the process of moving at that point or something like that. Or I was just like really tired and lazy or something. But after a while, I decided to give the cards a shot, and oh my god, I fell in love so fast. They're really strong, especially against other Xyz matchups, and they can surprisingly take a lot of wins from competitive decks. Especially when we get the new cards out of Legacy of Destruction, I think that this deck could be scary good in the hands of the right pilot. But I don't want to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get right into my Goblin Biker deck profile for the February 2024 format, post Phantom Nightmare. Starting off with what else but the Goblins, we have 3 copies of Doug Charger, 2 copies of Mean Merciless, 2 copies of Clatter Sploder, and 2 copies of P.U.N.K. So I know what you're thinking, there's a proxy here for the second Clatter and second P.U.N.K. That's literally just because my order came in today, but I forgot I only ordered 1 of each of these at the time because I wasn't playing 2. But just please keep in mind that there's supposed to be a second each of these. I couldn't snag any from my locals last week because no one had their bulk on them, but it's a super and a common, so it's not a super big deal. I also won't be going too much into detail on what the cards do or anything because I did all of that in my Goblin replay video last month, which you should totally check out if you haven't already. I will put a link up in the annotation in the top right and the description. But the main idea behind having the second Clatter and especially the second P.U.N.K. is that I wanted to open Goblin cards more frequently. We have so many rank 3 engines in the deck that can all just 1 card combo into so many different combos. But the main thing is, if you get your gabonga hit with an Ash or an Imperm and you don't have a Goblin card already in hand, you basically lose access to the whole engine, and that shuts off a lot of your plays. So I wanted to play a lot more Goblins than I was before, because especially in like the Gold Pride variant, which is in the replay video, I was only playing 1 and 1 of each of these. But Clatter Sploder is definitely something I wanted to play 2 of anyway afterwards, but I decided to bump even P.U.N.K. to 2 because having that quick effect to special from hand just feels really, really nice. Especially, for example, I was doing some play testing earlier against my friend on Fire King Snake Eyes, and I will probably bring this up a few times. But one of the plays for example, I did end up losing that game because I literally opened both Mean Merciless and no ways to get her out of hand. But one of the things I did was I added P.U.N.K. off Gabonga so that on res, when I got hit with an SP, I could chain the P.U.N.K. to detach a material and special it and still have that level 3 body. So yeah, basically, I just wanted to see as many Goblins as possible without, of course, maxing out on them entirely. To wrap up the Goblin engine in the main deck, I'm just on the 3 copies of Grand Arrival and 1 copy of Grand Bash. I'm not playing Stampede. I was playing it in the replay video, I think, but really Stampede just doesn't do anything. It's a complete brick going second. It has the same first effect as Full Armor Xyz, just worse because you have to use Goblins. And then the Imperm effect just doesn't really come up very often because you're most of the time not really ending on Goblin Xyz monsters. So if you need an alternate card to search off the Grand Entrance, just search for the Grand Bash until Pile Up comes out. Pile Up is leagues better than Stampede as a trap card. But until then, I think that 3 Grand Entrance and 1 Bash is perfectly fine. I don't think you need a second Bash or anything, even if it is a really powerful card, especially when we get that new Xyz monster. That's it for the Goblins. Moving on to some of the engines we're playing in this deck to facilitate the Goblins, the most important one being the Punks. We're on 2 copies of Xiamen, 2 copies of Foxy Tune, and 1 copy of Deer Note for the actual Punk monsters themselves. Pretty compact engine overall. If you want to, though, instead of going for the Deer Note combos, to go for like Dragon Drive and get that extra body, something you can do to play a little bit more quote-unquote conservatively is actually playing the Punk Madam Spider instead of the Deer Note, and you can just straight up go Foxy Tune summon Spider. Spider search for the Dangerous Gabu, which remember is an Imperm, and you can then go straight into your Gabonga instead of going for your plays into like Dragon Drive and stuff like that. So it's a little bit harder for them to like get immediate nib value off of you, and instead of the Deer Note, you'd be drawing the Spider, which is at least normal summonable. It's completely up to preference though. I like the extension that the Dragon Drive gives you, especially if you want to play a card like Ghost Ogre in your side. but I just think that the P.U.N.K engine overall is pretty mandatory because it's one of the best starters and extenders, especially with cards like Emergency Teleport, which we'll get to. Speaking of the rest of the engine, we're on 1 Psychic Tracker and 1 Psychic Wielder. It was just the Tracker at first because it was a main part of the combo when you open a Xiamen or an E-Tele for the P.U.N.K combo, and you would search this off of the Dragon Drive. Speaking of which, I will absolutely make a separate combo video if we hit 100 likes on this video. I want to make sure people are interested. I have a couple of different combos I want to show you, but I added Wielder as well because A, you can search it off of the Dragon Drive if you already open the tracker, so you're not just wasting it on a search for another Xiamen or something. And also, I mean, it's a free level 3 extender. I had a game against my friend. We did like a total of like 7-8 games where I opened literally Tracker and Wielder, and it just helped me extend through everything, which felt really, really good. And then finally, to wrap up the engine, 3 copies of Emergency Teleport. I mean, this card's absolutely insane. Amazing starter, amazing extender, not a hard ones per turn, helps you do so much. As you can see, we have a lot of things that get us free special summons like E-Tele, but if you want a normal summon, you can play the 3 copies of Tour Guide. She is also a 1-card combo on her own. She's really, really damn good in the deck. Gets a free Gabonga, which goes into your full Goblin combo, and it puts the Mean Merciless on field, so you can go for something else off the search as opposed to the Mean Merciless. Also, she's really great at baiting hand traps, so if you open her alongside another engine like the one we're about to get into, or your P.U.N.K engine or something like that, you can easily use her to eat an Ash or an Imperm, especially because they might think you're playing Unchained if it's game 1, and then you can start popping off with the rest of your plays. Speaking of the other engine, this one definitely had me really excited when I found out that I could play it. We had 2 copies of Terratop and 1 Takatomborg. So Terratop's definitely coming to 3 next list, which is going to make it a lot more consistent and a lot more amazing. But Terratop in general is such a powerful combo. I mean, you can open it and do your full combo if you open just it and like a bunch of non-engine, or you can just use the Terratop alongside your 1-card combo to go into Gossip Shadow before you start doing anything else. So yeah, you can still get Drolled on the Terratop, which is really annoying. Droll's like really frustrating for this deck. But you can use it to stop things like Nib, which is another really prominent hand trap against the deck. Also, Takatomborg's summon condition does come up in other situations, especially if like a Boom-Mock, but we'll get to that when we get to the extra deck. For our hand traps and just some other miscellaneous non-engine, we're playing 3 copies of Ash and 3 copies of Bell. I think that these are probably the best hand traps in the format right now. I think they're better than Imperm, and then also, these are level 3s, which did come up in my playtesting, that you can normal summon in a pinch to make a really important rank 3, such as Gabonga to get your plays going, or even something like an Ashura King. And then wrapping up the non-engine, we just have 2 copies of Talents and 1 Called By. Talents and Called By are really good against hand traps, especially Droll, which my opponents always seem to open when I go first. Not quite it for the deck yet, because we have 1 copy of Ready Fusion and 1 copy of Instant Fusion. So these cards are really, really great extenders when you're playing a more like quote-unquote pure Goblin build, which is mostly just rank 3 turbo with all the goblins and stuff as your main goal, as opposed to like the Gold Pride variant. And it's really, really nice because you don't really need the extra deck space that much for like the 1 target that you play. And this can really help you in a pinch, especially if something like Tour Guide gets hit with a hand trap. You can go like normal Tour Guide, get Impermed, and then use one of these to extend and go full combo anyway. We're also on 1 copy of Rhoda because Boom-Mock and Doug are both warriors, so it's essentially a 3rd and 4th copy of those cards respectively, so that's pretty neat, even if Droll is a big threat there, so I might end up cutting this card just because of Droll. And finally, the 1 trap in the deck is the single full armored Xyz. We are playing the Xyz armor package in the extra deck. It's way too good not to in this deck, and this card can do a lot of cool stuff on the opponent's turn, such as making Gossip Shadow or Cicada King. That's it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we of course start with 2 copies of Big Gabonga, and I am playing the 1 Crazy Beast. Big Gabonga is such an amazing card, and this is basically the biggest like combo point as well as the biggest choke point, because if you don't already open goblins, Gabonga getting Impermed or Ash is going to feel like hell, but if it goes off, you are in for a treat. It searches a goblin like Doug, sits there with 2 materials to get all of your goblin plays going from there, and then even gets to attach monsters on the field as material to not only give it more material, but clear off boards. Came up when I was attaching a Flamberge on my opponent's board, and it just basically won me the game there. And then even the end phase effect is something that I didn't use at first when I played the Gold Pride build, but in this build you end on frequently end on things like Dark Lancer, IP, and Gabonga, which is like one of your main end boards. And during the end phase you use the Gabonga to attach Clatter Sploder, you then use IP to use itself and Gabonga to go into SP or something, and then you go Clatter Sploder detach from your full armor Dark Knight Lancer, special itself and Doug Search, and then you can use full armored Xyz to use both of the level 3s now on board to go into an Xyz monster like Gossip Shadow, Cicada King, etc. It feels amazing. And then Crazy Beast, I've seen some people not play this card. I know it's a bit situational to make because you have to have the grand meeting or a Goblin Biker Bash, whatever it's called now, but I think it's a really good card. I mean, it's basically a guaranteed 3,000 attack because you'll have the continuous spell live. You can attach back rows such as Fire King Sanctuary or Island on activation. The protection's really good against cards like Kieran, and I also really love the graveyard effect. It doesn't come up all the time because you're not always summoning this card every single game. It only comes up like every once in a while, but the graveyard effect can just single-handedly bring you back from a bad situation, or at least bait out cards such as Ghost Bell. I mean, shit, if you have it engraved and your opponent tries to Princess, you can at least use this to summon, attach material, and then protect itself by detaching the material when they try to use Princess effect. Overall, really good cards. I can't wait to add the new Xyz to the lineup though, even if it's not the best. As I mentioned, we are playing the Xyz armor engine, that being the 1 Torpedo, 1 Fortress, and 1 Dark Knight Lancer. These cards are so good. Torpedo giving you that draw can easily draw you into more non-engines such as Talents, Ash, Bell, etc. Fortress searching the trap card is really good, but it's also pretty cool even if you do open the trap card because you can just detach that free material, and you can recycle it really well off the Dark Knight Lancer to give it a really big body for a Zeus. And then Dark Knight Lancer himself, of course, is so amazing. Having that non-target attaches material is really important in an era where cards like Kieran are everywhere, like Circle of the Fire Kings. Plus, he'll get massive, he'll have all this protection from the trap card and the torpedo and all of that, and he can just be an absolute monster on the end board. Overall, probably my favorite package in the extra deck. For some generic rank 3, like kind of negate cards really, we have 1 copy of Gossip Shadow, 1 copy of Cicada King, and I'm even playing the 1 Ashura King. I think all these cards have really good applications in their own situations. Of course, as I mentioned, Terror Top and stuff can go into Gossip Shadow early to protect from Nib, or I mean, sometimes you can even use it with like a Tour Guide in order to protect from Droll. Plus, it's a typical part of your end board in a lot of situations as well. Cicada King doesn't come up as much, but it can come up, especially if you already had the Gossip Shadow and you use the Xyz to go into Cicada King. That can end up being pretty huge, especially because it's a really big body. But I definitely wanted to talk a bit more about Ashura King because this is a card I actually didn't like for the longest time, because I didn't like the commitment of 3 bodies just for the negate. But the big thing here is that you're not making Ashura King on turn 1 for the negate or anything. You're usually making Gossip Shadow in that regard, but you're using the Ashura King for follow-up on turn 2 or 3 when you're trying to go for the OTK. It does a whopping 7,500 damage on its own on an empty board, which is pretty fucking massive already, but it's also super amazing for that protection due to the negate, and by being a big 3 material Xyz that you can continuously detach materials from. The biggest point in my games against my friend was when he set up a board. He had to play through a lot of disruptions after he drolled me. I had like the Gossip Shadow he had to use the Imperm on, and then he had big Gabonga that attached his Bell Star, and then I had Ash. I had to use Bell on a called by for my Boom Mock. But overall, his end board ended up being the Princess Engraved with Flamberge on field and the Bell Star that he specialed after attaching it with Flamberge, and then getting the next Wanted. And he was really confident because he didn't know Ashura King was a card, and that it had like the negate and everything, because he was like, you know what, I have Princess, I have Flamberge for follow-up, I should be fine. Even though I had quite a few cards in hand. But I had 3 level 3 goblins left on board, and I literally just straight up went. First thing I did, I went into Ashura King, made sure I negated the Princess, and then he basically couldn't do very much else. I attached the Flamberge off Big Gabonga, I was going to make Crazy Beast to attach the Wanted, and then I was going to push for game there. Overall, pretty satisfied with the card, and I was thinking of cutting it once the new Xyz comes out because OTKing is pretty easy with that card, but it's a bit more situational, so I'll have to think about it. I'm pretty sure I want to keep the Ashura King. For some of the bigger your Xyz, we are playing, of course, 1 Typhon and 1 Zeus. This is not only an anti-Zeus deck, but also a Zeus deck in itself because it is an Xyz deck. And then Typhon is just a super solid card in general. It's also pretty good because even if you don't use the bounce effect, you can keep the material and then start popping off with your Goblin plays afterwards. For example, by keeping the material on and then on your opponent's turn using Clatter Exploder, Detaching Special. And you can do a lot of your Goblin plays even while under the Typhon, including things like Big Gabonga, which is pretty cool as well. The only links for playing are the 1 IP and the 1 SP. If you can't afford SP, I'm terribly sorry. You can play the Unicorn, I guess, but it's just nowhere near as good. But I mean, hey, at least the Goblin core in itself is fairly cheap. But yeah, IP into SP, one of your big parts of your end board, gets you free 2 disruptions, and then it gets you even more disruptions when you climb with like the Big Gabonga Clatter Exploder combo like I mentioned. We are of course playing the 1 Dragon Drive, as I mentioned. It's part of your main combo with the P.U.N.K cards and serves as an additional body for IP. And that's really it. I mean, that's all it does. It's a pretty big body, though, if you really need it to be, so that's cool. And then the final card, of course, our instant and ready fusion target, and the reason why I said Takatomborg's summon condition kind of mattered. We're playing 1 Dragoness, the Wicked Knight. Yeah, you're probably wondering why I chose this random Legend of Blue Eyes fusion vanilla for the effect, and it's literally just because it's a wind. So that means if you open like Terror Top and Instant Fusion and your Terror Top gets SP'd or something, or if you just open Instant Fusion Takatomborg, you can special attack Takatomborg under this card, which is pretty cool. That's literally the only interaction and the only reason why we play it over the other like 3 vanillas you could have played. You don't need to play it, you can literally play anything else. I mean, Flame Ghost or whatever its name is pretty funny. But literally we're just playing this because it's a wind. And that is going to do it for my Goblin deck profile post its release in Phantom Nightmare. Again, I am so excited to play this deck. I know it's probably not as good as playing a deck like Fire Brigade that I was going to play, or even Labyrinth especially, but I really, really love this deck. I think it has so many really fun interactions, even if a lot of the end boards are pretty simple. As I mentioned, if this video hits 100 likes, I will release a separate combo tutorial video showing off about 3 combos probably that I have made while coming up with this deck. I think that it has massive potential, especially once it gets more support cards, because I can see it getting even more due to being a Dia Bellstar lore archetype, so I can see at least 1 more wave of 1 or 2 cards. I would really hope for another main deck monster, so that Gabonga has another good target to search, especially if it's one that can detach the special from hand like Doug, especially as a quick effect, and I think that would be pretty cool. But I don't know, that's just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as it helps put this video and the channel into YouTube recommended, and if this content wants more like it, like the rest of my deck profiles, then perhaps consider subscribing and turning on notifications, because supports the channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free, and we're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. Also, if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards in the link down below, use code Aurora5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout and to support me financially. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.